Okay. Hello, everybody. It's 6:02 on Thursday, July 16th. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. I am the chair, Mike Capuano. With me are Sam Dinning, Amelia Aboff, Jahan Habib, and Rob Buchanan. We have a number of items on the agenda tonight, one of which is a public hearing that has already been opened and has been continued to today. That is Planning Board 2018-07-MA2-0320, which is 5 Middlesex Avenue. We also have some other business for the Planning Board, which continued discussion on the urban design framework for Boynton Yards and the rules of procedure and policy enabling thoroughfares. Intriguing stuff. And what I'm going to try to do is, if we can have the staff, I'm going to go on. You know what? I actually need to read the electronic notice in first. I'm sorry. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15th, 2020. This meeting of the Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. We will have an audio recording available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting, and this meeting is being recorded for those of you in attendance. So it is the discretion of the chair to take agenda items out of order. So I'm going to ask for a presentation on the rules and procedure and policy of enabling thoroughfares, because the staff that's going to present can present it and get out and won't have to sit through a public hearing for which they haven't directly been participating, or it's not their case. So I'd like a presentation on that, please. We've also got members of the planning board that will need to recuse themselves on other agenda items. So I figured I will get everybody together for the first agenda item. So if I could please have a presentation on the thoroughfares.
Okay, yes, Mr. Chair. Dan, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey.
Hello, everyone. Rebecca has my single slide. I think this sets a record for my slide decks.
I have two here.
Well, there's always the cover slide.
Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep. So go ahead to the first slide, Rebecca. So this is just a summary slide of the proposed language edits to your rules of procedure and policy, formerly called rules and regulations of the special permit granting authorities for the old ordinance, which is actually still in effect at the moment. In that language is a section about minor site plan approval. And the proposal is to include what we're calling enabling thoroughfares in the list of items that only require minor site plan approval. These are the result of very large scale development taking place in places like Assembly Square, Union Square, Boynton Yards, and other areas soon to come online. This is a picture of one happening right now in Assembly Square that you can see, and we've sort of defined these as the partial construction of a future thoroughfare, often without sidewalks or final surface conditions, to enable construction on adjacent lots or the early alignment and connectivity of underground utility infrastructure. This one was actually shown here, was actually permitted under the old ordinance through a PUD, so it didn't have to get approval for this, but in the same circumstance into the future, you know, all of the construction vehicles need to drive to and from construction sites, typically on a hard surface, and many of the times they're also pre-running the utilities under these surfaces, so then they don't want to drive on bare earth that they would put back on top of the utilities. So this could include everything from the sub-base of the future roadbed to the first application of blacktop to the utilities included under it, but not the final design of the entire thoroughfare, from its street trees, its sidewalk width, how the curbs are designed, the texture and design of the pavements, all of that stuff is still anticipated to happen through a full thoroughfare site plan approval requirement. So that kind of encapsulates what the thought process is around doing this. We still, anticipate full review by the engineering division, but like all other minor site plan approval applications, it would be the planning director would be substituted as the permit granting authority. But you can see how this is like an interim condition type of thing that we're needing to create a permit for, because the zoning ordinance actually says that the thoroughfare needs site plan approval regardless of its scope of design elements. So that's the main crux of this proposal. We also included some cleanup of the language related to ground story facades. Previously, we mentioned all of the various building components: storefront, lobby entrance, canopy, awning, and really what we should have referenced was the complete design of the ground story facade, inclusive of any building components. So that's what's reflected in that change. And we, through starting to do this, because it's an administrative process that the planning director signs off on, the act of writing a staff report and then a decision actually would happen simultaneously and would practically be the same exact document that covers the same material. So we suggest that we do it once by just issuing the decision, because that same staff report would just go instantly to Sarah Lewis, and she would have already discussed it with all of us and signed off. So that kind of conversation and discussion about compliance and permitting really happens simultaneously and doesn't need two documents like the normal process, which does not happen simultaneously. So that's an overview of all three changes by topic, but the biggest one is really the enabling thoroughfares. And that's it.
All right. Yeah, I mean, we've seen these kind of preliminary streetscapes before. We're obviously looking at rendering of one in Assembly Square. I think we may have gone through that on South Street for one of the projects. This seems to make sense to me that this would be part of our rules and regs going forward. Does anybody on the planning board have any questions or comments on this prospective entry into the rules and regs of the planning board?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Dan, if I could ask, I'm very sorry if this is obvious, but at what point to the extent that these kinds of thoroughfares are part of a larger development, and they are something where once utilities are laid, it would be difficult to reconfigure sort of lots and different parcel breaks, what are the remaining pieces of approvals that would be in place before we got to this step that would make sure that any new utility infrastructure was being laid in accordance with a plan that was reasonable?
Sure, that's a good question, actually. The what we've been discussing internally with engineering is that the application for any enabling thoroughfare should still include a compliant conceptual design for the streetscape of the thoroughfare, including its sidewalks and curb radii and all the crosswalks, all the stuff that it would normally be included, so that one can like overlay that plan on top of the utility plan and see that nothing is going to interfere with the or help highlight potential conflicts in the future. Engineering has really highlighted that it's hard to move catch basins for stormwater once you put them in. And the thing that this could impact the most is the tree planting criteria. which are fairly stringent about how much uncompacted earth is provided underneath a sidewalk for a tree. And so if you run utility, like our quick read of this would be one of the red flags we would be looking for, is that if somebody is proposing to run utilities under where the sidewalk would go, that would instantly mean it's going to conflict with the future tree plantings. So by looking at the utility plan with this overlaid conceptual streetscape, you can judge right away potential conflicts. That's how we are imagining we would look for make sure that the future full site plan approval for the future conditioned thoroughfare won't be negatively impacted, or that approving a enabling thoroughfare wouldn't instigate an applicant to pursue variances to get out of the normal requirements for that thoroughfare because of what they do at this early phase. So we definitely are sensitive to those impacts of doing this.
Thank you. And at an even more basic level, insofar as the thoroughfares here are dependent on a thoroughfare layout that is approved at some earlier step, can you remind us what earlier step that would be?
Yep, so that would be, most of these are going to come into existence because of master planned development overlay district that already had a master plan approved, and in that would be a layout plan for the thoroughfares and identifying what land is intended for streets, what land is intended for civic spaces, and what land is intended for buildings. That we'd then be judging the alignment of this temporary thoroughfare against. Some of these might be proposed, approved, used, and then ripped up. We don't, if it's just like blacktop to access a site versus the version that might prelay the utilities. So we even think that there might be a couple different versions of this, but they should always, unless they're the simpler kind, they should always line up with what the master plan approval has already laid out.
Are there any circumstances under which a thoroughfare would go in with only this level of staff and engineering review that was not previously approved in a master plan process and which is not intended to be temporary?
So technically speaking, anybody could propose to build a new thoroughfare in Somerville outside of the master plan district. So for instance, today, somebody with a large parcel in Innerbelt, let's say, could decide to subdivide that parcel, build a new thoroughfare to create additional street frontage. That's how you add value to land and make it more buildable. So in that circumstance, we would expect them to submit for a full application for that new thoroughfare and not this temporary version. I imagine that they could show up one day and say, hey, we want to build a thoroughfare beforehand to reach our development site, and that they may want to pursue this. In that case, we would want to make sure that we have the same level of understanding, but there wouldn't be a same level of understanding of what the future intent is, so that we'd still want to see the conceptual streetscape, but there wouldn't be a governing previously issued permit that is ensuring, how that street lines up and everything. We see Somerville hasn't seen an independent thoroughfare outside of large scale redevelopment in quite a while though. So we don't anticipate these being frequent, but it could happen.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions of the staff on this proposed rule change? No? Okay. Seeing none, this is going to require a vote of the planning board to adopt this rule change, to incorporate it within our rules and regs, or policies and procedures, or whatever the term we're using now. So that being the case, the chair moves to adopt these proposed rule changes as explained and proposed and explained by staff, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote, please. The chair votes aye.
Dan votes aye.
Amelia's on mute. Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Right. Thank you all. It's a unanimous vote in support of these rule changes. I'm going to move on then. Thank you, Dan, very much.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is also part of our other business. It is the only piece of other business that we have before we'll get to the public hearing that we have continued. So I'd like to, I think it's Melissa who'd like to do further presentation and further discussion on the urban design framework of Boynton Yards, please. So if we could have, I think Melissa come up.
Hello, everybody. This is Melissa Woods.
Sorry, if I
Thank you for
can, I'm
having
going
me
to
this evening.
take the opportunity then to recuse myself for this part of the conversation.
Yeah. Let's just wait for Amelia to log out. And Rebecca, will you be able to send her a text, or I will when we're ready to reconvene?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure that
Thank
you
you.
can be back in at the appropriate time.
Rebecca, do I have the go ahead to get started?
Yes, you can. Give me just 1 minute and I'll have them drafted.
Sure. While Rebecca's bringing that up, I hope that seeing the draft still at the top of the plan didn't alarm you, because the last time I was here, I said the draft would be removed. And then I realized later that evening, I can't remove the draft till it's adopted. So what we have in front of you guys this evening is what we see as a close to final version of the Boynton Yards Urban Design Framework. Dan presented last time on what this document is. And when we hit on the topics of Boynton Yards, we touched on the fact that it was still going through our internal departmental review. And so that's added 2 spreads and some small edits to the other pages of the urban design framework. So I wanted to touch on a few things. The first being on the mobility page, because I was able to follow up, Rob, on a topic that you had brought up at previous meetings regarding the connection, the underpass connection between Boynton Yards and Union Square East. And we've since, peers of mine in the city have been tracking that since the idea in the Union Square neighborhood plan. And it's slightly more difficult, well, maybe a little bit more slightly difficult to achieve than originally envisioned in the plan because of some infrastructure work along the Green Line tracks that would put the underpass significantly lower than just the roadway condition to support the structure for the railroad track. So although we are not anticipating, we don't want to preclude it, but we're not anticipating master plan special permits to create this connection for us. On the modal, there's a new page for modal hierarchy that we worked with our mobility team to add to create good cycling and pedestrian connections, both along New Street, which is Columbia, and then Windsor, and then also New Street, as we've addressed in the plan, which will be a new thoroughfare in Boynton Yards. And then also on South Street, a realigned South Street and Windsor Street because of its connection across Cambridge Street and down to MIT and Kendall Square. And then lastly, we added a page on sustainability. And I think this is the page that I'm most excited about because it's something we didn't really dig into in the neighborhood plan, but there's a great opportunity in Boynton Yards and some of our other transformational areas as well to really make an impact. Boynton Yards is susceptible to precipitation-based flooding, so a rain event is what that means, and has high heat impacts because of propensity for a lot of asphalt and no tree cover at this point. So making sure that we address that in master plan and contributing lot permits is essential to making a great place in the Boynton Yards area. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I know Dan is also here as well, if he would be better to address them as well.
Sure. So my first question, Melissa and Dan, is you've presented this as a further draft document. What would you anticipate between now and a final presentation that would change between what you're showing us now?
So we are ready. If you are ready, we are ready for adoption of this. It has gone through a P&Z and OSPCD and engineering review. So we are ready for adoption based on whether you have comments or not, and also if there's any comments from the public, but we're poised for adoption.
Okay, so by calling it a draft, it just means that it has not been adopted yet by the planning board.
Correct.
Okay, that was a little bit of a question that I had. What else do you have to show us? That's a
Yeah, sorry about that.
no, that's okay. That's why I wanted to clarify. No, I think you guys have done a great job with laying out this document and the presentation to us. I think you've addressed some of the questions that we had the last go around. I was pretty satisfied with what you all presented for this concept of Boynton Yards. And I'd like to open it up to other members of the planning board to see if they have any comments or questions on the revised document tonight.
Yeah, I have a number of questions, and I'm happy to maybe spend a few minutes discussing them. I also don't want to derail our meeting. So some of my comments are really more like I think they might be minor, but I maybe I just ask a few of them and get your reactions and some clarifications and to the staff if that's all right. Would that be okay, Mr. Chair? Okay. So I was just taking a look at, I believe it's page 3, purpose. And I guess I need a clarification. When we talk about the Boynton Yards UDF supplements the provisions of the, I assume capital BY is Boynton Yards sub area of the MPD. Can you tell me more about what that's referencing? That's not the neighborhood plan, that's the master plan district overlay district?
Yes, that's correct. It's the master plan development overlay district, which was it's organized with sub areas for all of the different neighborhoods. So there'll be one, really the reason we did this is because it makes the zoning map itself legible, because we have one heavy black outline over anywhere that ends up with a master plan development overlay district over top of it. And so making that chapter of the zoning ordinance have sub areas for Boynton Yards, Union Square East, Inner Belt, Brick Bottom, on down the line, was a decision that influenced the need to make 7 different hatched overlay districts on the zoning map. So that's why it's a sub area of the MPD overlay district.
Okay, and maybe it's just verbiage. I think it would be clearer to me if we said, you know, Boynton Yards sub area of the master plan development overlay district of the Somerville zoning ordinance, like that.
Yeah.
The fact that this is in the zoning ordinance is an important point to me. If anybody's looking at this document, I'm not sure that would be apparent to them.
We can absolutely make improvements and maybe make, I'm forgetting what it's called now, but an abbreviations key at the beginning of the document.
And just as another editorial aside, as best as I can tell, all of the images and graphics, you know, like for example, this one on this page, I don't know that I necessarily understand. There's different colors that aren't, there's no legend. So I'm not really sure kind of what that, if that carries significance. And I guess I would say that that same question comes up on like the public space one. There's, you know, just a gray box. There's just labeling that I'm not sure I follow. Same for the buildings. There's different things with different shading. And I just want to be sure that if we're approving something and these colors have meaning, that we know exactly what it is that we're approving. Do you sort of follow what I'm driving at?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be another suggestion. And beyond that, I guess the only real other substantive comment I had, and this is really more of a question, gets to that underpass issue, which is, you know, it's my understanding that the planning board, when we go to approve something, it has to be consistent with sort of the overriding planning documents. In this case, the Union Square neighborhood plan, where it shows that that underpass exists. So I guess my question is, I understand that, you know, it may never occur given the infrastructure costs and engineering hurdles to make that happen. But how do we approve an urban design framework that lacks it when the neighborhood plan has it? And I guess my question is, do we need to somehow amend or footnote the neighborhood plan? How do I guess that's an open-ended question to the staff, which is how do I reconcile that?
I think the best way to look at how that finding or that specific consideration for approval of a master plan should be understood in the context of actually the sentence right after it. So that one, we use the word consistent, and the word one, I believe the item right after it uses the word conformance in the findings criteria. So it's like conformance with the approved master plan, and then consistency with the neighborhood plan. And the difference in those words when we use them in the zoning ordinance is allowing flexibility to meet the intent and broader goals in the neighborhood plan or in some revision without having to be absolutely 100% compliant like you would have to be for instance, a number in a dimensional standard of the zoning ordinance. So the word consistency is meant to have, or to provide you with that, the discretion in determining that a master plan lives up to the expectations of the neighborhood plan without meeting necessarily all of the details, or even proposing a different version of the same details. So that was our intent in using those two different words differently.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for the staff? Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for the staff. Shifting to page 6, the connections page, I'm just very curious to hear a little bit more about New Street and the fact that it's going to be a primary pedestrian-oriented street connecting civic spaces and commercial building sites via short walk to Union Square Station.
Sure. So this is Melissa Woods again. sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. There we go. So New Street was something envisioned in the neighborhood plan that was carried forward in the zoning. The zoning has a required thoroughfare, but a developer would be able to shift that north or south by, I think it's 50 feet, depending on their proposal. And the idea, Boynton Yards needs a street network. It doesn't have one currently. You know, my favorite part is to drive in and take South Street eastward and get to the point where you're supposed to turn around. And the intent in this street network is not to create through traffic in Boynton Yards, but to connect it to its broader neighborhood. And New Street is going to be the primary pedestrian path for new development to get to the T station. So some ideas for that include possibly a curbless street, definitely good bike facilities, slow speeds, slow speeds for both New Street and a realigned South Street, but even more so focusing civic space activity and retail activity along New Street, more so than South Street.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, Melissa. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is there any other further discussion or questions of staff on this presentation? No? Okay.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question. On the purpose page 3, the standards that are on the right, are these are coming directly out of the zoning ordinance, is that correct?
Absolutely. This is Melissa again. And the thing that I love about this section is it takes the legalese out of the zoning ordinance. So it's almost, you know, Michael is laughing because he's an attorney, but it's almost like your cheat sheet to what's in about 8 pages of the zoning code. Here, do this, and you're getting closer to development in this neighborhood. So yes, it is straight from the zoning, but without some of that zoning language.
Thank you. Yeah, I think as I read it, and I'm always trying to read things with an eye toward what, you know, a layperson, you know, to your point, could they read this and generally understand it? I would say it's like 80% of the way there or 90% of the way there. I think that some of these acronyms and, you know, GFA, community center, 20K max, I'm not sure that a layperson would necessarily understand what we're driving at there. So I guess my only suggestion is if there could be a further editorial review for clarity and labeling, that would go a long way.
If I may, Mr. Chair, this is Dan. There is space actually on the first page that we could put a glossary of all of these abbreviations and everything that could be helpful for the reader. There's a whole empty column of space if I remember right. And I certainly appreciate trying to be more legible to the layman. The intended audience for this specific document is any board members that, like, this needs to live on longer than any of us. Regardless of, you know, turnover on the board, turnover on the staff, different developers coming and going. So it's primarily, I would say, board members, staff, and developers. But I personally have always had like a career objective to be more understandable by more people. So I certainly share that desire.
Right, I was going to say, Dan, while this is going to be read by a lot of lay people, it's not necessarily going to be implemented by a lot of lay people. It's going to be implemented by, staff with particularized knowledge, board members with particularized knowledge, and this particular document, more likely than not, sophisticated developers and folks that understand zoning codes, but to the degree that we should make it as readable as possible for folks that are going to be getting involved with the process at the lay level through public comment and interaction with developers. I agree with Rod that it makes sense to explain what it is that we're trying to get folks to do.
Yep, understood.
Are there any other comments or questions by members of the planning board at this time?
Nope.
Okay. I think we are at a position where the planning board and a point where the planning board can move to adopt this. I think the staff has done, like I said, a great job in reflecting our comments and questions from the previous meeting and have, I think, addressed everybody's questions and concerns this evening. So that being the case, the chair will move to adopt this urban design framework as presented and as conditioned that it will be amended to include what we had discussed during this meeting. Seconded by the clerk. I'm going to take a roll call vote. The chair votes aye to adopt.
Sam votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Phenomenal. We have a unanimous adoption of this design framework. So thank you to Dan and Melissa for your hard work on preparing this and presenting it and answering all of our questions. I'm going to move on to, actually, I'm going to ask someone, Rebecca perhaps, to reach back out to Amelia to bring her back into the fold. And I think this is where Rob is going to have to bow out, as I recall.
That is correct. I have recused myself from 5 Middlesex Ave. I sit on the board of Cambridge Health Alliance, and they are an existing tenant of the building on that site. So, I'll excuse myself then. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I will wait for Rob to exit the meeting, and then we can. So if we have a representative of the applicant who'd like to get on board to discuss where we're at and any staff further presentation. We've now gone through this project with some particularity with a number of revisions to the staff memorandum and know where you all believe that we are at, because I'd like to get to this great project. So I'm going to ask the applicant of 5 Middlesex Avenue to be unmuted and make any comments that they want.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I'm just noting for the applicant team that I have made Bill Harris a presenter, and I have unmuted Peter Carboni so that he can begin the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Peter Carboni, a principal with Novaya Real Estate Ventures here in Boston. Here tonight with my partners, Ed Nardi and John Baxter from Crescent Development, as well as our full development team, including Sal Zeno and Ed McDonald from Biomed. As you know, we were before you just about two to 3 weeks ago on June 25th to present the changes to the approved master plan, the plan that we have that was approved back in June of 2018. What we'd like to do today, I think we had a great discussion back on the 25th, a lot of good back and forth on a number of issues on the project. I think what we'd like to do tonight is just to sum up a few of those that Bill Harris is going to do, and then Sal is going to address maybe a few more issues of sustainability and the innovation space and a few more of those. So I think would like to just go through those. Again, the four major changes to the plan are the conversion of the residential, about 190,000 square foot residential building to commercial, with the addition of the 80,000 square feet of innovation space, which Sal's going to take you through a little bit more in detail what that is. It's really an amenity for the project and for the city as well. But Sal's going to go through that. And then the plan also adjusts for the parking counts, which is really the conversion from the resi to the commercial. And the project provides more in better usable open space under the new plan. So those are the four major kind of things that are done. There's obviously a lot more to the plans, but those are the kind of the four major things. So what we're going to do in probably just a few minutes, we're going to have Bill Harris go through some of the other changes or just point out some of the comparisons, and then we're going to turn it over to Sal and then come back to any questions. So Bill, when you're ready, and then Rebecca, if you could unmute Bill, that would be great.
Good evening, thank you. It's Bill Harris. I'm principal at Perkins & Will Architects, and I want to make sure that you can hear me and you can see my screen. It should be the cover page of our presentation.
Yes.
Yes, visible?
Yes. Yes, we can see it.
Okay, terrific. When I present it, you all disappear from my monitor, so I can't see you. So this is a, I beg pardon?
Lucky for you.
Yeah. This is our recap of where we were at our last presentation of this amendment to the original approved master plan. We're showing and recapping the highlights, primarily motivated by a change of program with the conversion of some of the residential units, so that most of the site here is for commercial use, and with associated redesign of open space, building massing, associated parking, and so forth. And we have had the community engagement, and of course have presented to you folks once. So just in terms of the project improvement summary on a technical basis in terms of the site features and so forth, we have a comparison here. We'll show you several slides where the approved master plan is on the left and the proposed amendments are on the right. So here we're highlighting the introduction of a network of streets within our block, and we are extending Road L down to Middlesex Avenue, west to Middlesex Avenue from K Street, which is where it was before. And we're also taking block 21 and creating two blocks, 21A and 21B, with a road connecting those two. So you can see that from a data perspective, we've increased the streetscape in terms of footage and numbers of streets. The next thing that we wanted to highlight about the amendment proposal is the increase of not only open space, but the accessible nature of the open space, and its exposure along Road K, and also its visibility from Foley and from Revolution Drive as well, based on the orientation and massing of the buildings. With respect to the gateway corners of the site, the original master plan had primarily parking and lobbies at critical corners, as you can see here. We have more active uses now, so that the primary gateway coming up along Mystic Avenue is now not a parking lot. It will be a proposed as a building, and the corners are retail and active use. Here you're seeing that we have fully 50% reduction in ground coverage for parking. So on the left-hand side, you can see that in the master plan as approved, we had a big block of block 21 was a big square podium of parking, and then a balance of on-grade parking over towards Middlesex. And what we are proposing here is that we consolidate the parking into one spot along Middlesex Avenue, and that results in about a 50% reduction of ground coverage for parking. And here that same move on the parking, and plus the introduction of the two smaller streets within our block, means that along primary pedestrian streets of Foley and Road K, we're actually reducing the amount of exposure to parking by about 50%. Also associated with parking and access and the introduction of these roads, we've relocated the entrances to the parking areas and have removed them from direct Foley or Road K access. So we're particularly excited about Road K, the Festival Street now being, we've taken off a lot of traffic going into the parking lots along there. Those entrances are no longer there. And along Foley, we turn into our new side street, but the parking access itself is not from, is not along the curb there. And then the actual usable open space is increased by 0.8 acres. And you can see diagrammatically here where that takes place. And as we noted earlier, it's not just the acreage, but it's also the exposure along Road K, and all made possible by the removal of 5 Middlesex and the tower that was positioned in the middle of that area previously. And now for the public benefits beyond these master plan distinctions, I'll pass the microphone to Sal Zeno.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, members of the board, and Bill for that. Just kind of wanted to briefly run through some of those. We spoke a little bit about the public benefits last time, and in addition to the jobs and the relatively robust financial package, we thought one of the things that we didn't touch on, which is unique to this project for us, is the innovation space and really what that is and how it functions. So that's one of the things we asked for as part of this amendment was an additional 80,000 square feet of NFA, and the idea is to dedicate that space to innovation space. One of the really what that is it allows us to create smaller scale spaces that are flexible and that accommodate smaller users potentially within the city of Somerville. We think that it's given the scale of this project, about 1.5 million square feet, we think it's a great accompaniment, something that will help us create the ecosystem that we're striving to complete here. And so we touched on a few of the specifics of what this means for it, but everyone knows that building a lab space is expensive and it's complicated. What we strive to do with this is make it a little bit easier for smaller users. So you're just looking at some of these photos, and I think, the one at the top left, I think the ecosystem is important to us. I think it's as much about the outdoor space and the need and the desire to activate that as it is about what's happening inside. So you see just a few of those other images are the type of spaces that we would build out, the type of equipment that we would provide in lab spaces, the type of meeting space that we would plan to include in this innovation space to really, again, to reinforce that goal of creating an ecosystem here, not just 3 large lab buildings. And then, like I said, on the lease terms, shorter lengths and the fact that they are fit out and then the spaces are fit out in a flexible manner allows us to be more accommodating with lease terms. So that's a little bit on what the innovation space is. Like I said, I think we took it for granted that everybody sort of understood that last time, so I wanted to go through that in a bit more detail. We've done it on a smaller scale in Kendall. It's actually a lot of fun. It's exciting. It's exciting to deal with smaller users. It's a much more dynamic environment than with the larger users. So that's the plan for the innovation space. We also think that's going to be lend itself to creating the level of ground floor activation that the city's striving for. These smaller spaces with more people. I think that's it for the innovation space. I just flip to the next slide. I am, I'm not controlling it, right? So one of the things that we heard loud and clear were the questions about sustainability. And, this is our starting point, and obviously there's a lot of room for improvement here. It's a sea of asphalt and an older, inefficient building. We just want to flip to the next slide and go through some of our future plans. We know that we talked last time about our commitment to LEED Gold. One of the other things that I think is important to point out here, just in terms of what we're doing in Biomed as a company, we do have an in-house facility and property management staff, and I think their first and foremost job is to keep the buildings on, and the second job is to make sure that the buildings continue to run efficiently. They are judged based on both of those factors. It's a commitment also that Blackstone has made to sustainability and to efficiency. And we are constantly, with that team, one of the things that allows us to do is constantly assess the feasibility of improvements. Whether it's smaller things like LED upgrades, it's continuous. We're always looking at them. We're always looking at them for new projects at different solutions, whether it's a new type of energy recovery for an exhaust system, new air handling units, new type of chiller optimization. So we just touch a little bit on some of the things that the buildings are going to have today. EV charging stations was one of the things that we've certainly discussed with Sarah and Rebecca and their team. It's going to be at the baseline. There's going to be about 115% increase in the number of EV charging stations at this site than were originally planned. So we I won't go through all the details here, but if we could flip to the next slide. So this is a little bit more on it. I think one of the things here too is, I think some of these credits will get us above gold. We know that. We do obviously still have concerns with going any higher than that. It's two reasons, for both marketability and due to the fact that a rating system, it can change. Things change. And I think the most important thing for us here is to ensure that we're providing a product that's appealing, both in terms of efficiency and just marketability to some of our Cambridge clients. So we have for the next slide. Yeah, so just some of the, thought we'd wrap up with a few of the previous renderings that we had. And that's it, it's gonna evolve. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. We're all here.
Thank you very much. So we do have, as I recall, an updated staff memorandum for this, because there is new information that was presented tonight. Is that accurate, Rebecca?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is accurate. And Sarah Lewis is here if you have any questions for any of the particulars.
I think we will, but in the interest of moving the public hearing along, it is the policy and practice of the planning board that when there is additional information that is presented, new information that's presented, by way of this presentation this evening, that we reopen public testimony, so that the planning board is able to hear and to synthesize all of the public comment, along with the new application, the new presentation, along with any additional comments and considerations from the staff before we decide what to do in moving forward. So at this time, what I'm going to do, and I don't know if there's many folks who are listed as attendees who are not affiliated with the applicant, but I am going to open it up at this time for public testimony. So if you are a member of the public and you want to provide public testimony this evening, please click the raised hand option that you've got, and we will call on you, and you'll have 2 minutes to provide your testimony. I'm not seeing any quite yet. We can give you another few seconds just to make sure that there's nobody that can't figure out the technology, because it's yet another system that, you know, I've had to learn too. Okay, I am seeing no raised hands, going once, going twice. I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing, and I'm going to continue it by asking members of the planning board if they have comments, questions, or suggestions of the applicant or of staff in discussion amongst ourselves. So I usually like to hold off until I get kind of where you guys are. You've heard my comments on this application in the past. I think this has only clarified some things that that we have raised issues with previously, but I'd like to know kind of where we're at this evening. Who, if anyone, would like to go? And bear in mind, while we make this stand, before we go forward, I just want to remind everybody that this is a master plan, that there will be actual applications for actual buildings that will come to us in the future if this is approved, at which time we will be able to make substantially more specific conditions on buildings and things of that nature. So this is, again, to frame the discussion that we're having tonight and the vote that we'll take either tonight or sometime in the future, that this is a master plan. So go for it. Sorry.
That caveat may address what I was going to ask, at least in part. On page 2 of the staff memo, so Ms. Lewis, I believe this is for you. There is a sentence saying staff acknowledges that the maximum floor area ratio of 10 may also be exceeded, but is not perceived as a conflict with the original approval. I was hoping to get clarification on why that is not perceived as a conflict and why that is not perceived as an issue at this time.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is Sarah Lewis, Director of Planning and Zoning. The conflict, as the applicant had requested additional height as part of their original approval, and these buildings do not exceed those heights. It was just that the height was requested as part of the waiver, where the FAR was not, but usually as this is under the old ordinance, those two are commensurate with each other. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that the FAR was also being exceeded due to the height.
And sorry, you just said this, and I think we talked about this last time too, but the height under the current proposal is at or below what was already approved last time.
Correct.
And do the FAR requirements, would those be revisited at a future time with specific proposals?
Yes, that has to be then revisited again with each individual building gets submitted under the next process, which is the design and site plan review. So those will be revisited on individual building bases.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, you indicated to me that you had a minor edit to a condition. Since you already have the floor, you may as well address whatever it is that you would propose as an edit.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's on further conversations with engineering. Condition number 41, the last sentence needs to be edited slightly just to read that the project must reduce stormwater peak flows in accordance with the stormwater requirements at the time of application for building permit. Runoffs may not increase. So that was the only piece that was being changed.
Thanks, Sarah. Or Amelia, have you got any comments or questions on this proposed master plan? Yes.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I have a couple of questions for the applicant. In our conversation, when this was first reviewed, I thought we were going to potentially hear more about district energy solutions or other sort of site-wide considerations that your team was considering. Could you please speak to that?
My apologies, Mr. Chair, and to the board. This is Rebecca speaking. I believe that we have the ability to unmute whoever Peter Carboni or Sal Zeno would like to designate for that response.
Yeah, Sarah,
Let's get someone on board.
this is Peter Carboni again. Yeah, I think Sal is probably the best one to maybe talk a little bit in general about that, and if
Sure.
we need to drill down any more, it might be Bill or Gatam from our team. But Sal, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So that, we touched on that at our last meeting. We currently work with Veolia, now Vicinity, in Kendall Square, and they serve a number of our buildings with the steam service from their Kendall plant. So it's something that that we're very familiar with, and something that are on the facility side they actually appreciate, because it offers additional redundancy to buildings that are typically critical. So we have there's some ongoing discussions between AHA and mechanical engineer and Vicinity to see whether or not there are some possibilities there to bring Vicinity into the fold here. I think there's a lot of questions here that they ask, like, when are these buildings going to go up, and how is this all going to take place, and how much and how soon, and those are still questions for us. But like I said, given our familiarity with it in Kendall and the fact that we do appreciate it, it's something that we thought would be interesting to take a closer look at here.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, especially the scale of this project. We don't often have projects of this scale to work with, so.
Exactly, that's the reason I'm interested in discussing the sustainability for this, because there's such a big opportunity here.
Yeah.
And I know that we'll have these conversations in more detail at the building level approval, but to the extent that these sorts of considerations require planning and commitments and discussion early on, I appreciate that that's something that's top of mind for your team as well.
Yeah, no, it is, and I would I'd welcome a more detailed conversation with Rebecca and Sarah's team down the line if there is, it's exciting. It's we'd like to talk about that stuff.
During the presentation on sustainability, you also said that one of the downsides, I think, to committing above a LEED Gold standard was marketability. And I have to admit, I've never heard higher LEED ratings referred to as a negative for potential tenants. Could you expand?
Yeah, sure. There are some commitments on the Platinum side, whether I think our greatest concern relates to energy consumption. And some of the downstream requirements that land on our tenants. Those are the ones that we're a little bit reluctant, not knowing where this market is going to land lab is somewhat new to Somerville, and so we're trying to keep ourselves in a position of maximum flexibility. And so, you know, committing to standards that may change gives us just, you know, a bit of concern here.
Understood. I do just want to offer a piece of commentary that I mostly have for my colleagues, but I think if you want the opportunity to discuss it, I'm open to that, which is in my mind, the change here that's being requested is for additional square footage and for a change of use that shifts this project from something that was a comparatively lower energy use in a residential building to a much higher energy use in the lab performance. And I understand that the standards are, you technically have access to the loophole here of this being under the previous zoning. But I'm concerned that you're asking for something that's above and beyond the original approval. And frankly, the EUI of the existing building on site is undoubtedly much lower than what's being proposed due to it being a building that was built in the 80s and a building that is 40 years into its useful life and would have been replaced sooner than this new construction building will be. And as much as I'm very, very appreciative of the huge design changes that have been improvements to this parcel overall, the fact that there's this trade-off of a higher intensity use coming in, replacing a lower intensity use building with a higher intensity, a higher performance requirement is, it just remains a little bit challenging for me.
Could I actually ask staff to address the concern that I think Amelia raised, which is precisely the relief and the request that the applicant has as it relates to the zoning that applies to this particular project. I think, Amelia, you indicated that this goes above and beyond what was in the original approval. And I simply don't know the answer to that. I'm hoping staff might be able to address what was provided for under the old zoning, under the original approval for this master plan, and what is for us now.
Through you to Ms. Ava. The original approval, I am pulling that up as I speak. I want to clarify a question, if I may, that when you say the above and beyond, you mean with the increased square footage in the program from the commercial to the
in my mind, the way I'm thinking about it is the nexus of the increased square footage and the fact that that increased square footage is also of a higher demand use. But the square footage is my question, I believe.
Okay. Yes, under the previous ordinance, because this is a revision to an existing, we are definitely, as you noted, limited on what we can request. By going to the LEED Gold commitment, they are actually matching, I believe, the previous approval for what was the limited lab buildings there. And it is, I believe, beyond the requirement of completing the worksheets and potentially encouraged of becoming certified that was in the previous ordinance. So I feel like they are making best efforts as we understand it, even though it might not be to the standard that we would ideally like it to be under our new ordinance.
Thank you, Zara. That clarifies it, at least my satisfaction, because I do understand that we are working within the framework of the zoning that was in place at the time the original approval was issued. And had this particular applicant come before us with a new application today, that will be held to a different standard. That's what I understand, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking.
Yeah.
Peter Carboni is asking to be recognized.
Please recognize him.
Okay, Peter, you're unmuted.
Sure. Thank you. Again, it's Peter Carboni. Just a couple of points. So I think what may be a little bit lost, or just to emphasize, under the master plan that was currently approved back in June of 2018, that building, the existing 160,000 square foot building, was not intended to come down, certainly not in the initial phases. So you're right in saying, Bob, I think it's probably a 40 to 50-year-old building that not very energy efficient, as I'm sure you imagine, and probably would not clarify or certify into any LEED standard today. So understanding that, yes, we're asking for the additional 80,000 square feet and the conversion from residential to commercial, and on top of that, the other 80,000 square feet. We haven't quite done an analysis when you compare that to when you take off the other 160,000 square feet of today being an energy, not a very good building, and converting that over, coupled with the fact that when we did the prior project, I don't know if you followed the approval we got a couple of years ago, we actually got a lot of pushback on the residential with regards to air quality and air pollution coming off the highway. And we were asked many times by Mr. Zamor, members of the board, about either going to higher standards on either closed window systems, which on apartments are tough to do. So, but the point is, given the particulate matters and all those conversations we had, spent hours and hours of discussions on the highway, it's really a non-event, obviously, when we convert over from the residential to the commercial. But I'm not sure, respectfully, that enough consideration is being given for what we're taking down. And also, as Sal mentioned, I mean, the zoning today that we're under obligates us just to be LEED certified. That's the zoning today. Biomed is committed to going to the LEED Gold standard, which we think is a pretty significant change. Now, they would never build, I shouldn't say never, their commitment wasn't just to build to LEED certified. To go to Gold, though, is a pretty big step from just LEED certified. I know there's been discussion about going to Platinum. I know some of the other buildings in the city, or most of them, are Gold. I think the later stages under the new zoning of Boynton and maybe some over at North Point or Cambridge Crossing may be required for Platinum, but I'm not 100% sure on that. There will be things that Biomed's looking at that will take you over and above Gold, but I can tell you, if you were to condition them in some respect, you'd have to get to Platinum. We just don't know if we have a buildable project or a competitive project in an area in Somerville that has not been proven out as a lab location as of yet. So, and even in other places, there have not been a lot of other lab commitments made. There's other buildings to be built, as you know, but we're still in somewhat blazing new territory here. So you have a long-standing tenant or owner in Biomed that's made huge commitments in the adjacent, over in Cambridge, that are looking to come in and do the same thing here in Somerville, building first-class buildings at a commitment to go Gold, as well as try to get above that. But if there's a condition, just being very blunt, to have to get to Platinum, we don't know if that's achievable for this particular project in this area, which is a new area that we're trying to entice tenants to get into and so forth. So trying to just hit the issue extremely head on for everybody, in that also taking down that 160,000 square foot building, it's not a very good building, and that should be a huge benefit, to what we're doing. So just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a recap summary of how we're looking at this, and the continued commitment to want to keep looking at sustainability issues in the city, as well as this project. But again, if we're conditioned on that Platinum standard, I just candidly don't know if it's achievable for us right now from a project standpoint. I don't know if anybody else on our team wants to add to that, but that's kind of where we are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else on, Amelia, were you through with what you had questions and comments on? Would you like to continue?
I have some additional comments, but I don't think that there are questions for the applicant, so I can save them for our discussion when you're ready to move on to that.
Sure. Are there any other questions by Jahan or Sam of the applicant or of staff before we move forward in a more fulsome discussion? Yeah, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for the applicant. First of all, I want to commend the applicants for the excellent presentation. I do want to better understand the retail space. One of the slides showed a retail space designation. I'd like to understand what that entails, and also any potential impacts of the vehicular traffic, and also the connectivity to the site, as well as the Greater Assembly Square mixed-use district.
This is Peter again. Why don't, Carboni, why don't either Bill, maybe you want to talk about some of the retail questions or some of the retail things?
Okay, so here's a, let's see if that's the best view. This is another view. What you're seeing here is the site plan diagram at ground floor, essentially. And the purple indicates the retail. And what we've done is looked at this from two perspectives. One is the retail as an element along the street front, and also in terms of activation of the building at the grade level. So our first key area that we want to point out is along Foley, where people, especially coming from the Kensington Connector, will have a little bit of active use at retail along the initial part of the street. And then we have a few other pieces of retail at key corners along the park. And so what we're envisioning is that the Foley Street retail helps activate that street, and at along the park, that it activates the park and provides essentially a retail amenity that may or may not be food and beverage along that public space there. We're not anticipating that any of these are big box retail, or that they would have a significant impact on traffic. They're basically pedestrian scale retail. Any other comments from my team? Or?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions of the applicant or of staff before we begin our discussion amongst ourselves? No? Okay. Seeing none, I think I've made, in my previous discussion with you all, I think it was pretty apparent that the amendments from the previous approval to the presentation of this master plan were much more in line with what I think we as a community, based on comments from the public, comments from staff, and discussion from the board as previously constituted, what we were hoping to see out of this master plan. We do have a ways to go, and we do have perfections that can be made on individual sites with individual concerns, which is how this type of thing always goes. But for the purpose of this particular application, which is an amendment to a previously approved master plan, which is governed under the old zoning. Frankly, there's only so much that we can do and so much that we can condition and so much that we can, wouldn't say hopeful, because I think that's not necessarily reflective of the considerable work that this applicant has done getting from A to where we are now with a considerable amount of public input. So our kind of restrictions in mind, I think the applicant has done a fantastic job in getting to a significantly better place than where they were back in 2018, I believe it was 18. Just that I don't see any reason as one member to not move forward and approve this master plan, knowing fully well, and the applicant does too, that as individual site plan reviews will come forward with individual buildings and thoroughfares and open space plans, things like that, that we will be in a different position to be able to impose different conditions that are more site specific, that I think address some of the concerns that that we all have kind of on a more micro level. But on a macro level, this is a significant step forward from where we were a few years ago. And with the constraints that we will vote under, I don't see any reason why we would not move forward in approving this master plan as conditioned, and taking our concerns for the individual buildings and thoroughfares and public and open spaces as they come before us, as the entire process is designed to work. So I will wholeheartedly support this master plan amendment. And I think the applicant knows that we will have, and I will have, comments and concerns and conditions that I'd like to see imposed as we move forward with individual projects on a more granular level. So those are my overall thoughts as we sit here this evening, and I'd like to hear where you all sit. Yes, no. You're muted.
Sorry, my corner of Somerville is loud, so I keep muting it so we don't pick up motorcycle noise. I agree that this project is a huge improvement in terms of the macro plan and the design and the layout, and I am very appreciative of how responsive the applicant has been to the community concerns that were voiced earlier in the process. I would have no problem supporting this application moving forward this evening. I would like to just add, for gratification of my colleagues on the board, the source of my concern about the difference in energy consumption between the original PUD and what's before us today. And that is that the existing building, based on its vintage and its comparatively lower intensity uses, probably has what's called an EUI, which is an energy use intensity in the mid 60s. And an average commercial lab building in the US today has an average EUI around 115, 120. So my concern is that the changes that are being made to this application, while they are an improvement in many, many other ways, effectively are likely to result in an almost doubling of some of the energy consumption on that site. And I think that could really be addressed and mitigated through potentially solutions that rely on the scale of this project, like the district energy solutions we were talking about. So if there were an appropriate condition to continue to encourage the applicant to continue a dialogue with the city about those types of solutions, understanding that it would not be a requirement, but perhaps just a condition to continue that conversation, I would consider that to be potentially worth doing. But I trust, based on the conversations we've had this evening, that the applicant has heard loud and clear that that's an interest we have, and will hopefully continue those conversations with the city on a voluntary basis.
Thanks, Amelia. I mean, I have no concerns with adding a, kind of like what you said, and what we often do is kind of put a condition on, or additional condition on, to make an encouragement. Because that oftentimes speaks to where the board's intentions lie. If it's something that we can't legally condition, it is something that we can make our, like I said, our intentions known to the applicant and to the world, that this is what we'd like to see happen to, to the best efforts of the city and the applicant. So I would have no problem with adding that as a condition, kind of a best effort condition. Because I think,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
this is Sarah Lewis, if I may, propose some language. That,
we're gonna do that already? Okay, go for it.
well, I mean, it seems like it's, sort of as it's part of the conversation. I think it's a good thing to at least throw out there right now. The applicant will further ongoing dialogue with the Director of the Office of Sustainability and Environment to further the study of district energy over the PUD site.
That's nice and succinct. I like that, Sarah. I don't know if that meets the, does that kind of address the concern that you had, Amelia? Because it sounds to me in a total lay situation that it does.
I mean, I have to say, as much as I understand parts of, while I have some expertise in building level sustainability, I'm not an engineer, and it may well be that the answer is that there is not an appropriate district energy solution for this site. And if the Director of Sustainability would confirm that, I will let it go, but I appreciate having the condition that encourages the conversation.
I would have no problem incorporating that as a condition that doesn't bind anyone to anything that we can't legally condition, but it does facilitate a conversation and can dictate the nature of our future discussions with individual site plan reviews. So I would be in support of incorporating that as a condition. All of this, of course, will be incorporated into a vote we'll take. So do we have any further discussion by members of the board on this application for an amendment? No? Okay, that being the case, thank you all for the last couple of meetings, and thank you to the applicant for one, addressing the concerns of the planning board that's currently constituted, but also taking considerable steps in incorporating into this amendment the concerns that the previously constituted planning board, as well as members of the public, as well as members of the city staff had in what we originally conditioned. This is the whole idea behind a master plan. It is a 30,000-foot document that usually is amended to reflect more specific and changing situations. So I thank the applicant and I thank staff for working so hard to get us to where we are this evening. I think this is going to be a fantastic series of projects. I look forward to getting through with more granularity as we go forward. So that being said, the chair moves to adopt the staff memorandum as condition, seconded by the clerk. I'm going to take a roll call vote. The chair votes aye enthusiastically.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Thank you very much, all, and congratulations to the applicant. We look forward to seeing you in months and years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We look forward to working with everybody as we go forward, and thanks for your time, much appreciated, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you, and thanks to Sarah and Rebecca. They've worked tirelessly on this for the last 6 to 9 months together with us, so thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a nice night.
All right, bye-bye.
To the board, before we go, it's my understanding that Rebecca, we have an answer to one of the questions, or at least the question that I'm aware of, that we had posited to the solicitor's office on our ability to make certain conditions. And I would appreciate at this time that you address the board on what the opinion of the solicitor is and remind everybody what the question was as well.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that, Rebecca speaking. This question had come up as a result of the master plan special permit application that was put forward by Edge Assembly. One of the conditions that was offered as was offered in that staff memo was that the applicant would provide some relocation assistance for a local business that is currently on the site and is looking at hoping to stay within the community and continue that business. I believe that, if I'm recalling correctly, that was condition 5 of that staff report. The question that was raised was whether or not that the ability to make that condition was within the purview of the board. Mr. Denning and I spoke together with the city solicitor's office to make sure that they fully understood the questions that were being raised. The notice, the report that comes out of that discussion was fascinating, and I feel like I owe a little bit of law school tuition to Mr. Denning and to Mr. Shapiro. Is that
don't say that. I just paid it all off. You don't want it.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. The answer is that because there would be no local legislation that would enable us to require such a payment, it would not, in fact, be possible to do without a home rule petition. However, as we had been given the initial guidance from the office, as this was a condition that the applicant had offered themselves in response to neighborhood concerns that were expressed about this particular restaurant, the applicant felt it was commensurate with the conditions that they were causing on the site, that they offered that freely, and the condition was added to the staff report as a way of constraining the scope of that offer, and that because that was offered freely by the applicant, that's the permission that we have in order to be able to condition that. I feel like I need to ask Mr. Denning if I have get an A+ on that, or just a passing grade.
I am going to ask Sam his opinion on Rebecca's dissertation.
We just graded on pass fail, so a very solid pass there. No, I think thanks to Rebecca and to the solicitor's office for providing some clarity on that. I think it does ultimately come down to restrictions based through home rule and restrictions on municipal ability to charge taxes and fees, and really to charge for anything that isn't very, very clear and explicitly authorized. Conditions can obviously take other more potentially creative forms, but specifically with monetary conditions, there is not a ton of leeway, at least as the law stands in Massachusetts for now.
Now I'm going to make it a little bit squishier. As I understand how you both have explained the solicitor's opinion, while we cannot condition it, so there are two poles, right? Is we condition it and they offer it. There is a meeting in the middle. as I understand, isn't precluded from what the solicitor has defined, which we can suggest. We can suggest it as a condition of an applicant. We can't make it a binding condition if they will not agree. But it sounds to me that this is something that we can propose and encourage an applicant to agree to, and hopefully will.
I think the where judicial review would be implicated there. The limit of judicial review is fairly binary about whether you approve or don't approve of a special permit, a discretionary decision, make a discretionary decision. So I think the risk would be if you request that and then don't approve a special permit application, for example, there would need to be a solid factual basis for why you didn't approve that application, was separate and apart from that fee, and that is entirely possible to make. So
Of course, and Sam, as a no, I agree with you, and as a historical and factual kind of background is we do ask for certain conditions all the time that we know aren't legally enforceable. Sometimes the applicants say yes, sometimes they say no. If they say no, there will be another. There has to be another reasonable reason for us denying a special permit. Oftentimes that isn't common because most applicants that come before us have applications that meet the requirements by and large. But to me, I see no problem in asking, because if an application has additional problems that would lend it to a denial by this board, there it is. I mean, and that's additional factual support for a denial by this board. But because this is something that this board believes is a positive and something that we would like to see, it's certainly something that if an applicant doesn't affirmatively offer, it's something that we would, I see in the future, something that this board could ask an applicant, would you be open to agreeing to the terms that we can, hammer out or something like that. Because I think most applicants want to be, or many applicants, I won't say most, many applicants do want to be good community partners in my experience. And sometimes it's seen in the ways of public benefits, and this is one of them. So while it's not something that we can legally condition, it's certainly something that we might be able to encourage, just like what we did is, please talk to staff about seeing if we can get to X. And if they won't agree to that, we can't legally condition it, but it's certainly something that we can ask. And if there are other legally defensible grounds to deny an application that we think is not worthy of approval, well, that condition is, it's secondary, or the proposed condition is secondary.
Yeah, just to clarify my comment, I completely agree. I think the legal risk I was mentioning is quite low and would take a few steps before we even got close to feeling that risk. So I think that's great. I think I completely agree with everything you're saying, Mr. Chair.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you for raising the question, Sam. I'm glad we do have an opinion on this because it's something that I think this board as a body would like to encourage going forward to the extent that that can. And again, I think this speaks highly to the applicant that voluntarily proposed it. So is there anything else that anybody has for the good of the meeting, or shall we all kind of go and have dinner?
The latter.
Go home.
Okay. The chair moves to go home. Where are you now? Please don't.
Leave the meeting.
Chair moves to adjourn, seconded by the clerk. Chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes
Jahan votes aye.
Wonderful. We've got another meeting coming up. I've got to look at my phone calendar just so I can put it on the record as to when the next meeting is. It
Yes,
is in,
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Our next meeting is
August
on the 6th. Yes.
okay, and we will still be virtual. So thank you all very much for a great meeting tonight, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Be safe. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Take care.